When my HOA turned my storage facility into a community dumping ground, I discovered their corrupt scheme had been stealing from us for years. What would you do if you found out your neighbors were using your generosity as a cover for embezzlement? Your uncle left you what? My wife Melissa nearly choked on her coffee when I showed her the will. The lawyer's letter felt heavy in my hands. Uncle Frank had left me his storage facility on Maple Road, just outside our Sycamore Heights neighborhood. I know, it's weird, I said, still processing it myself. It's that small warehouse with the blue roof. The one we drive past on the way to the grocery store. Melissa wiped coffee from her chin. Well, that's different. What are you going to do with a storage facility? I sighed, looking at the property photos. The place wasn't huge, about 5,000 square feet with 20 individual units, a small office, and surrounded by a chain-link fence. It needed paint and probably a new roof, but Uncle Frank had maintained it decently. Sell it, I guess? We could finally afford that kitchen renovation you've been wanting. Melissa tilted her head, considering. Or you could keep it. People always need storage. It might bring in steady money every month. Before I could respond, our doorbell rang. I opened it to find Diane Reynolds standing on our porch, her perfectly highlighted blonde bob unmoved by the breeze. As HOA president, Diane had a reputation for knowing everyone's business before they did. David, I just heard about your inheritance. How exciting. Her smile was wide but didn't quite reach her eyes. May I come in? 10 minutes later, Diane sat at our kitchen table clutching a mug of tea. The timing is just perfect, she gushed. The HOA has been struggling with where to store our seasonal decorations and maintenance equipment. The shed behind the clubhouse is falling apart. That's unfortunate, I said cautiously. We've been saving for a new storage solution, but construction costs are just astronomical right now. She leaned forward. Would you consider allowing the HOA to use just a tiny section of your new property? It would be such a help to the community. I glanced at Melissa, who shrugged slightly. It seemed like a reasonable request. I suppose I could set aside 1 unit for HOA use, just until I decide what to do with the place. Diane clapped her hands together. Wonderful. Let's say a 3-month arrangement to start. I'll have Tom drop off a formal agreement tomorrow. After she left, Melissa raised an eyebrow. That was generous of you. It's just 1 unit out of 20. And it's temporary. What's the worst that could happen? 3 days later, I drove to the storage facility to start clearing out Uncle Frank's personal items. As I rounded the corner onto Maple Road, I hit the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked. The entire front of my property was filled with cars and pickup trucks. People were unloading furniture, boxes, and what appeared to be an entire boat. I parked on the street and pushed through the crowd. Diane stood in the center of the chaos, clipboard in hand, directing traffic like she was marshaling planes at an airport. Diane, what's going on here? I had to shout over the noise. She turned, beaming. Oh, David, isn't this wonderful? I told everyone about our arrangement. The community is so grateful. Our arrangement was for 1 unit for HOA equipment, I said, watching in horror as Mr. Gunderson wheeled a motorcycle into unit number 6. Well, yes, technically. But when I announced it at our emergency board meeting, everyone got so excited. We realized this could solve so many storage problems for our residents. My jaw dropped. You can't just. The Jensen family is moving next month and needed temporary storage, she continued, ignoring my protest. And the Wilsons are renovating their basement. Oh, and the Gundersons needed somewhere for their summer vehicles. I spotted Diane's husband Tom backing his truck toward the entrance. Inside the bed sat their entire patio furniture set and what looked suspiciously like a vintage pinball machine. Wait, this isn't what we agreed to, I said firmly. I need to ask everyone to stop. David. Diane cut me off, lowering her voice and gripping my forearm. The board unanimously voted to amend the bylaws yesterday. All common-use facilities must be equally accessible to paying members. Since you've designated this as a community resource, everyone has equal rights to it. She pressed a printed document into my hand. The top read Bylaw Amendment 47.3, Community Storage Access. This can't be legal, I sputtered. I own this property. It's not even within HOA boundaries. Actually, the property line falls exactly 8 feet inside our jurisdiction, Diane said sweetly. Tom checked the county maps. I looked around helplessly. Mrs. Patel was arranging Christmas decorations in unit number 12. The high school wrestling coach was stacking weight equipment in number 15. Someone had taped handwritten name labels on almost every door. You need to stop this right now, I insisted. I never agreed to let the entire neighborhood use my property for free. Diane's smile tightened. David, you're making a scene. Think about how this looks. Do you really want to be the person who takes back a generous offer to your neighbors after they've already started moving in? That's not very community-minded. Several people had stopped to watch our conversation. One of them was Karen Mitchell, our street's self-appointed decoration monitor, who had written me up twice for having my Christmas lights up 3 days past the acceptable removal date. Is there a problem? Karen asked, arms crossed over her designer workout wear. I've already cleared my garage to make room for my new home gym equipment. You can't back out now. I felt trapped. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting. This wasn't just Diane anymore. These were people I saw at mailboxes and block parties. People whose kids played with my kids. We can discuss this later, I said finally, lowering my voice. But this isn't what I agreed to, Diane. She patted my shoulder condescendingly. We'll talk soon. Now, could you help the Andersons with their grandfather's armoire? They're trying to fit it into unit number 8. I walked back to my car in a daze, amendment papers clutched in my hand. Somehow, my simple offer to let the HOA store a few boxes had turned into a free-for-all. And according to this document, I had no right to stop it. Driving home, my phone beeped with a new email. It was the Sycamore Heights community newsletter, sent to all 245 households. The headline made my stomach drop. Local homeowner donates storage facility to community. Grand opening today. My name was right there in the first paragraph. According to Diane, I had generously offered unlimited storage access to all HOA members in a heartwarming display of neighborhood solidarity. I pulled over, hands shaking. This had gone from a misunderstanding to a full-blown disaster in less than 4 days. How was I supposed to fight the entire HOA? What rights did I actually have? And why did I suddenly feel like I'd been the target of an elaborately planned takeover? Locks don't work when someone else has the keys. I discovered this ugly truth exactly 1 week after the storage facility takeover, when I arrived to find brand new padlocks on every unit, locks I didn't have keys for. Sorry, David. Karen Mitchell's voice made me jump. She was arranging plastic storage bins in what used to be my uncle's office. We had to change the locks after someone reported suspicious activity last night. Suspicious activity? This is MY property. I could hear my voice rising but couldn't help it. Who changed these locks? The HOA Security Committee. Karen didn't look up from her organizing. Don't worry. Diane will make sure you get a master key. Eventually. I took a deep breath. Karen, this has gone too far. I never donated this facility. I offered 1 unit for temporary HOA use. She finally turned to face me, hands on her hips. That's not what the community newsletter said. Not what Diane told everyone at the emergency meeting either. Her eyes narrowed. Are you calling our HOA president a liar? Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was my boss wondering why I wasn't at our 9:30 meeting. I had to leave, promising myself I'd sort this out after work. But by 5 p.m., things had gotten worse. The facility parking lot was full again, with neighbors unloading even more items. Someone had hung a hand-painted sign that read, Sycamore Heights Community Storage, over my uncle's old, Frank's Storage Solutions sign. I spotted Mrs. Patel struggling with a heavy box and rushed to help her. Thank you, David, she said gratefully. My husband's bowling trophies. We're renovating our basement and needed somewhere safe for them. Mrs. Patel, I'm sorry, but there's been a misunderstanding. I never agreed to let everyone use this place for free. Her face fell. But the newsletter said. I know what it said, I interrupted gently. But it's not true. Diane never asked me about opening the whole facility to everyone. Mrs. Patel looked confused. But she showed us the paperwork. Your signature was on it. My blood went cold. My signature? Can you describe this paperwork? It had the HOA logo at the top. Something about property donation for community use. She shifted uncomfortably. It said you were honored to continue your uncle's legacy of community service. Uncle Frank had been a grumpy loner who once chased kids off his lawn with a garden hose. Community service wasn't exactly his thing. I thanked Mrs. Patel and drove straight to Diane's house, fury building with every mile. This was beyond misunderstanding. This was fraud. Her pristine white colonial came into view, its perfectly trimmed hedges and color-coordinated flower beds screaming, "I follow the rules I created." Diane wasn't home, but her husband Tom was mowing their already perfect lawn. "David, he killed the engine. What brings you by?" "Your wife forged my signature on an HOA document," I said, not bothering with small talk. "I need to speak with her immediately." Tom's friendly smile disappeared. "That's a serious accusation." "It's also illegal," I replied. "Where is she?" "Board meeting at the clubhouse." His voice had turned cold. "But I'd be careful throwing around words like illegal if I were you." "Is that a threat, Tom?" He restarted his lawnmower. "Just friendly advice between neighbors." The clubhouse was a 10-minute drive away. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. What was happening? How had a simple misunderstanding escalated into document forgery and veiled threats? And why did they want my storage facility so badly? I pulled into the clubhouse parking lot just as the meeting was ending. Board members streamed out, including Raj Patel, who gave me a sympathetic nod. Diane was last, locking the door behind her. "David, what a nice surprise." Her smile remained fixed as I approached. "We need to talk about the fraudulent document you've been showing people," I said quietly. "The one with my forged signature." "Fraudulent? I don't know what you mean." She tried to step around me. I blocked her path. "Mrs. Patel told me everything. You showed her paperwork claiming I donated the storage facility. You faked my signature." For a split second, her mask slipped. Something calculating flashed in her eyes before the smile returned. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "I simply showed everyone our amended bylaws, which you're aware of, and the agreement you signed when you offered the space to the community." "I never signed anything." "Well, that's not how I remember it." She checked her watch pointedly. "I'm already late for dinner. We can discuss this at the next board meeting. Feel free to submit your concerns in writing for the agenda." As she walked away, Raj approached me cautiously. "Everything okay?" "No," I admitted. "They've basically stolen my property and are now claiming I donated it willingly." Raj glanced around to make sure no one was listening. "You wouldn't be the first. The Schmidts lost their RV parking pad the same way last year. They had county approval, but somehow the HOA claimed it violated some buried clause in the CC and RS. How do they get away with this?" I asked. "People don't want to fight," he shrugged. "It's expensive, messy, and Diane makes sure those who resist face consequences." "What kind of consequences?" Raj winced. "The Schmidts got violation notices every day for 6 weeks. Mailbox height, improper grass length, unauthorized wind chimes. Each notice came with a fine. They finally gave up." A cold feeling spread through my chest. "She can't just take my property." "Maybe not legally," Raj agreed, "but she has the HOA's legal fund at her disposal, while you'd be paying out of pocket. Most people decide it's not worth the battle." I drove home in a daze, trying to make sense of it all. The storage facility wasn't particularly valuable. It needed repairs and updates, but it was mine. Uncle Frank had left it to me, not to Diane Reynolds and her power-hungry HOA board. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. My garbage cans were missing from their spot beside the garage. I found them dragged to the front of my lawn, tipped over with trash spilling out. Taped to my front door was a violation notice. Improper garbage receptacle storage, $50 fine. Repeat violations subject to increased penalties. I checked my watch. It was barely past 7 p.m. Trash pickup wasn't until tomorrow morning. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Inside, Melissa was on the phone, her face pale. When she hung up, she looked at me with worried eyes. That was Amanda from across the street. She said we should check our mailbox. I went back outside and opened our mailbox to find a stack of official-looking envelopes from the HOA. 6 separate violation notices, each citing a different infraction. Unapproved garden border stones, excessive bird feeders, non-compliant porch lighting, improper mailbox height, unauthorized window screens, and most ridiculous of all, disruptive lawn ornaments, for the small ceramic turtle my daughter had made in art class. Total fines, $450. All dated today. Melissa appeared beside me, reading over my shoulder. This can't be coincidence. It's not, I said grimly. It's Diane Reynolds showing us what happens to people who don't fall in line. What are we going to do? Melissa asked. I stared at the violation notices, anger building inside me. They thought they could bully me into submission with fake fines and intimidation tactics. They thought I'd give up like the Schmidts and who knows how many others before me. They were wrong. First, I said, we're going to find out why they want that storage facility so badly. Then we're going to fight back. How? Melissa looked skeptical. They control everything. I smiled for the first time all day. Not everything. Uncle Frank kept meticulous records. And I bet those records will tell us a lot about exactly where my property lines really fall. Little did I know that my uncle's dusty old property maps would reveal a secret that would turn the entire Sycamore Heights power structure upside down. Your property doesn't belong to you anymore. Karen's words echoed in my head as I slammed my car door shut. Nobody takes what's mine. Nobody. I marched into the county clerk's office clutching my deed papers. The clerk, a gray-haired woman named Gloria, looked up from her computer. Someone stole my storage building, I blurted out. Several people turned to stare. Gloria raised an eyebrow. Stole a building? That's a new one. Sit down and start from the beginning. For an hour, I spread papers across her desk. My uncle's will, the property deed, the HOA amendment, their newsletter announcing my donation. Honey, they can't just take your property with an HOA rule change, Gloria said, tapping my deed. That's like me saying I made a rule that your car is now my car. Doesn't work that way. Gloria pulled up property maps on her computer. Look here, your storage facility sits on this parcel. And the HOA boundary line runs. She traced a red line with her finger. Well, would you look at that? Your building isn't even inside their territory. It's outside by nearly 12 feet. My jaw dropped. They have no authority over it at all? None whatsoever. Gloria printed the boundary map. And here's something else interesting. The county sent violation notices to your HOA 3 times last year about improper equipment storage. They needed to find a proper storage solution or face big fines. I felt my face grow hot. When was the deadline? Let me check. Gloria typed quickly. Next Tuesday. They're cutting it close. Armed with this information, I visited my friend Miguel, a real estate attorney. He reviewed everything, then wrote an official cease and desist letter. This should do it, Miguel said. And if they ignore it, we can file for a temporary restraining order. I decided to deliver my news in person at the next HOA meeting. I arrived early and sat in the back, watching neighbors filter in. Some nodded hello. Others whispered when they saw me. Diane tapped her gavel. First item. The new community storage facility signage. Excuse me. I interrupted, standing. I'd like to discuss that facility. Diane's smile froze. David, how nice of you to join us. We were just discussing the sign options for the community storage area. Funny timing, I replied, walking to the front. I've spent this week researching property law. A hush fell over the room. Tom Reynolds pulled at his collar. Did you know? I continued, placing the boundary map on the table. That my storage building sits outside HOA boundaries by exactly 12 feet? I had it professionally surveyed yesterday. Karen jumped up. That's impossible. We checked. Did you? I turned to her. Or did you just assume? Because county records are very clear. I placed another document on the table. And here's something else interesting. The HOA has been cited 3 times for improper equipment storage. You're facing a $10,000 fine unless you find a solution by next Tuesday. Diane's smile vanished completely. We've been transparent about our storage needs. Really? Then explain this. I held up an email I'd obtained through public records. This is a quote for $48,000 to build a new storage facility. Dated exactly 1 day before you showed up at my door with your community benefit proposal. The room erupted. Neighbors turned to each other, voices rising. You were going to steal my property to avoid paying a fine. You changed the HOA rules specifically to take what's mine. Karen stood up, pointing at me. This is ridiculous. We were doing you a favor by maintaining that ugly building. You should be thanking us. Thanking you. I laughed. For trespassing? For stealing? For lying to everyone here. Diane banged her gavel repeatedly. Order. We have a binding agreement. No, we don't. I slid Miguel's letter across the table. My attorney disagrees. You have until this weekend to remove your belongings. An older couple in the corner started clapping. Then another neighbor joined in. Soon half the room was applauding. Diane's face turned dark red. This meeting is adjourned, she shouted over the noise. As people filed out, several neighbors patted my shoulder. Good for you, one whispered. Walking to my car, I spotted Raj, my neighbor from across the street. That was quite a show, he said, falling into step beside me. But be careful. Diane doesn't lose gracefully. What could she possibly do now? I asked. Raj looked at me with concern. I've lived here 10 years. When the Johnsons questioned the pool renovation budget, their yard was suddenly full of code violations. When the Garcia family complained about the noise rules, their approved home addition was mysteriously revoked. A chill ran down my spine. You think she'd retaliate? I know she would. Raj glanced back at the community center. And Tom works for the city planning department. They have connections. I thought about my beautiful yard, my recent fence installation, my home business that operated under a special HOA exemption. What should I do? I asked. Raj smiled slightly. I didn't say give up. I said be careful. And maybe start documenting everything about your property right now. Take pictures, measurements, everything, because I guarantee they're already planning their next move. I drove home wondering what would happen next. I'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. And from the look in Diane's eyes as I'd left, she wasn't just angry. She was out for blood. What would she target first? My house, my yard, or something I hadn't even considered? A chainsaw's roar ripped me from sleep at 6:17 a.m. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. 3 men in yellow vests were cutting down my prized oak tree. I rushed outside in my pajamas, heart pounding. Stop! What are you doing to my tree? The workers paused. One man in a hard hat approached, clipboard in hand. HOA emergency removal order, sir. This tree has been marked as dangerous. Dangerous? That tree is perfectly healthy. I just had it checked last spring. He handed me a paper. Not according to this inspection report. Says there's root damage threatening the sidewalk and power lines. The report was dated yesterday and signed by Diane Reynolds as HOA president. My hands shook with anger. This is my property. You can't just... Sir, we have proper authorization. You can take it up with your HOA, but we have a job to do. I called Melissa at work. They're cutting down our oak tree, the one we hung the kids' swing on. What? Why would they do that? Revenge? I said, watching as another branch crashed to the ground. Pure revenge. I drove straight to Diane's house, still wearing my slippers. She answered the door in tennis clothes, racket in hand. David, what a surprise. I'm just heading out for my morning game. You know exactly why I'm here, I said through clenched teeth. My tree. The one my kids grew up climbing. She tilted her head with fake sympathy. Oh, that terrible situation. But the inspection found serious safety issues. We can't risk having a tree fall and hurt someone. It was fine until I exposed your storage scam. Diane's smile hardened. Careful with accusations, David. They could be considered defamation. She checked her watch. I'm late for tennis. By the way, I noticed your fence yesterday. It appears to be 6 inches taller than regulation height. Expect a notice. Before I could respond, she brushed past me to her car. By the time I returned home, my beautiful oak was nothing but a stump. Melissa stood in the yard, tears in her eyes. 30 years old, she whispered. We've had family photos taken under that tree. The next morning, a violation notice appeared on our door. Fence height violation. $150 fine. The day after that, unapproved mailbox design. $100 fine. Then, excessive bird feeders. $75 fine. Unauthorized garden stones. $50 fine. And improper house numbers. $80 fine. They're trying to break us financially, Melissa said, looking at the growing pile of citations. I wasn't the only target. Raj received 6 violations in 3 days after he questioned Diane at the mailboxes. The elderly Schmidts, who had applauded me at the meeting, suddenly faced complaints about their rose garden, which had won neighborhood awards for 8 years running. We need to fight back together, I told Melissa. This isn't just about our storage building anymore. I invited Raj and the Schmidts over for dinner. Harold Schmidt, a retired man with thick glasses and suspenders, brought a bulging folder. They picked the wrong people to bully, Mrs. Schmidt said, serving herself salad. Harold was a contract lawyer for 40 years. Harold nodded. This goes beyond normal HOA nonsense. I've been digging through their financial records. They're public documents, though they don't advertise that fact. He spread papers across our dining table. Look here. Last year, the HOA collected $85,000 specifically for playground renovation. The playground that's still broken? Melissa asked. Exactly. And see this company that received a $40,000 deposit. Harold pointed to an invoice. Triple R Construction. Guess who owns it? Tom Reynolds' brother-in-law, Raj answered. I checked state business registrations. My mouth fell open. They're stealing from us. Harold nodded grimly. For years. Inflated landscaping contracts, fake consulting fees, mysterious administrative expenses. They've been treating the HOA account like their personal piggy bank. Mrs. Schmidt pointed to another document. And anyone who asks questions gets pushed out. Remember the Hendersons? Their yard was suddenly full of violations after Jeff Henderson asked for a financial audit. They moved away rather than fight. They tried the same trick with your storage building, Raj added. They needed it to fix their storage violation problem, but they didn't want to spend HOA money on a proper solution, so they tried to take yours. I felt sick looking at the evidence. This is actual fraud. Criminal fraud. Yes, Harold agreed. And I have a plan to expose everything. But it's risky. Raj leaned forward. I think we should pretend to give in. What? Melissa and I exclaimed together. I mean, act like they've beaten you down. Tell Diane you've reconsidered her offer to make the storage facility a community resource. But secretly, we'll set a trap. Harold nodded enthusiastically. We need evidence of them abusing their positions. If we can document clear violations, we can take this to the county prosecutor. And I know exactly how to catch them, Raj added, lowering his voice. I have a friend who installs security systems. As they outlined their plan, my stomach twisted with both excitement and fear. This wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about exposing years of corruption that had hurt dozens of families. If we fail, Melissa said quietly, they'll make our lives impossible. We might have to move. And if we do nothing, Mrs. Schmidt replied, they'll keep stealing from everyone and bullying anyone who speaks up. I looked at the stump of my oak tree visible through the window. The tree my daughter had climbed as a child. The tree that had shaded our yard for 30 summers. I'm in, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. But we need to be smart. Diane and Tom have connections all over town. Then we need better connections, Raj said with a mysterious smile. My cousin works for the local newspaper. How do you feel about going public with what we know so far? The group fell silent, considering the implications. Going public would mean no turning back. Were we really ready to start a neighborhood war? Or was it time for someone to finally stand up to the corruption that had poisoned our community for years? They took the bait, I whispered to Raj as we watched Diane and Tom hurry into my storage facility with boxes labeled financial records. At 11:43 p.m., the hidden cameras I'd installed captured everything in night vision. Their hushed voices, their nervous glances, and most importantly, what they were hiding. 3 days earlier, I had shocked everyone by seemingly giving in. I've decided to accept the HOA's position and allow full community access to my storage facility, I announced in an email to all residents. Melissa thought I'd lost my mind. Trust me, I told her, showing her the small cameras we'd hidden throughout the building. This isn't surrender. It's a trap. Harold had discovered something big. The HOA was under investigation by the county for missing funds from the playground renovation project. What they didn't know was that we'd anonymously tipped off the investigators ourselves after finding proof in the meeting minutes. Diane and Tom will panic when they hear about the investigation, Raj predicted. They'll need to hide or destroy evidence. He was right. My generous donation gave them the perfect opportunity to stash incriminating documents where they thought nobody would look. The next morning, I found Karen rearranging the space, claiming she was organizing for efficiency. Feel free to move things around, I said cheerfully. I trust the HOA completely now. Her suspicious look was priceless. What changed your mind? Let's just say I've seen the light about community responsibility, I replied, noticing her eyes darting to the corner where Tom had hidden his boxes. By the way, there's a special HOA meeting tomorrow night. Will you be there? Of course, she said. Diane says it's very important. What Karen didn't know was that we'd called the meeting, not Diane. We'd invited every homeowner in Sycamore Heights with a simple message. Your HOA fees are being raised again. Come find out why. The community center buzzed with conversation when I arrived. Many neighbors who never attended meetings had shown up, curious about why they might be paying more money. Diane looked rattled by the crowd but put on a brave face. Before we begin official business, she announced with a tight smile, I'd like to thank David for his generous donation of the storage facility to our community. People clapped politely while I caught Raj's eye. It was time. Actually, I said, standing up, I'd like to explain exactly what I've donated. We need to stick to the agenda. Diane cut in sharply. Harold spoke up from the back. I believe everyone here would like to hear this, especially before voting on the proposed 15% fee increase. The room fell silent. People who had been checking their phones suddenly looked interested. I haven't donated my facility to the HOA, I said clearly. I've donated temporary access to something much more valuable. The truth about where your money has been going for the past 7 years. Raj wheeled in a projector and laptop while Mrs. Schmidt handed out folders to every stunned homeowner. Inside these packets, I continued, you'll find copies of HOA financial records showing mysterious consulting fees paid to companies owned by board members, contracts with massively inflated prices awarded to Tom Reynolds' brother-in-law, and nearly $50,000 in missing playground renovation funds. Tom jumped to his feet. This is slander. You can't prove any of this. Actually, we can, I replied calmly, nodding to Raj, who started the video. The screen showed crystal-clear footage of Tom and Diane entering my storage facility the previous night, hiding boxes and having a whispered conversation. If they find these invoices, we're finished, Tom's voice rang out. Karen gasped loudly. On screen, Diane was saying, we'll blame everything on the previous board if we have to. No one can prove anything if these papers disappear. But that's not all, I continued as the video played. Yesterday, we shared this evidence with County Prosecutor Jenkins, who has opened an official investigation. The room exploded. Some people shouted questions. Others demanded Diane and Tom resign immediately. Through the chaos, I watched the color drain from Karen's face as she realized she'd been an unwitting pawn in their scheme. "You tricked us," she said when she reached me, her voice barely audible above the noise. "No, Karen," I replied. "Diane and Tom tricked all of us. For years." Across the room, Diane and Tom were backing toward the exit, faces ashen. Mrs. Schmidt, moving with surprising speed for her age, blocked the door. "The police are outside," she informed them with grim satisfaction. "They'd like to ask about those missing funds." As officers entered the room, I felt no triumph, only sadness for our broken community and determination to rebuild it honestly. The stunned faces of my neighbors reflected a terrible question. If we couldn't trust the people we elected to look after our community, who could we trust at all? "You won't believe what I just saw." My neighbor Jeff burst through my door without knocking. "The police are at Diane and Tom's house loading boxes into their cars." After weeks of waiting, the investigation was finally moving forward. The scandal ripped through our community like a tornado. Some neighbors took sides immediately, but most were simply shocked into silence. The day after the meeting, people gathered in small clusters at mailboxes and driveways, whispering about stolen playground funds and secret kickbacks. My phone rang constantly with questions I couldn't answer. "What happens now?" became everyone's burning question. I found Karen sitting alone on a bench near the duck pond, staring at nothing in particular. When she saw me, she flinched. "Did you know I was part of their scheme too?" she asked without looking up. "I don't think so," I replied honestly. "I think you were just doing what Diane told you to do." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She made me feel important, like I was protecting our community from people who didn't care about the rules. Her hands twisted in her lap. "I was so mean to you about your tree." The confession surprised me. Karen Mitchell admitting she was wrong? Maybe there was hope for Sycamore Heights after all. A week later, flyers appeared on every door. "Emergency community meeting. Rebuilding our neighborhood." Raj had reserved the public library meeting room since the usual HOA venue felt tainted. "We have two choices," Harold told the packed room. "We can wallow in anger about what happened, or we can build something better." Most board members had resigned in shame. Those who remained looked shell-shocked. Nobody wanted to lead after what had happened. "I nominate Mrs. Schmidt for interim president," I said, standing up. The room fell silent. "She's lived here longer than anyone. Her husband was a lawyer, and she was the first person to question the financial records." To my surprise, Karen seconded the nomination. "She's honest," she said simply. "That's what we need now." Mrs. Schmidt accepted with a stern look that reminded me of my third-grade teacher. "First order of business," she announced. "Every financial record will be posted online. Every penny accounted for." People applauded nervously. "Second," she continued, "no more ridiculous rules about bird feeders and garden stones. Rules should protect property values, not punish creativity." The applause grew louder. "And third," she said, fixing me with a determined stare, "we need a headquarters for this new beginning. David, what do you plan to do with your storage facility?" All eyes turned to me. This was my chance to reclaim my property completely, to be done with the whole mess. Instead, I heard myself say, "I'm creating a real community space, not owned by the HOA, but available to everyone through a nonprofit I'm establishing." Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. "Why would you do that after everything that happened?" someone called out. "Because Diane and Tom don't get to ruin the idea of community for all of us," I answered. "They stole money and abused power, but they can't take away our neighborhood unless we let them." 2 months later, I stood amazed as volunteers transformed my old warehouse. Melissa had designed a layout with a tool-lending library, meeting space, and even a small coffee corner. Raja's accounting firm donated shelving units. The Schmidts brought in comfortable chairs from their basement. Most surprising was Karen, who showed up with paint and brushes. "I want to help," she said. "I need to make things right." We worked side by side, painting the meeting room a cheerful yellow. When we finished, she said quietly, "I'm selling my house. Too many bad memories here." "Where will you go?" I asked. "My sister's town. They don't even have an HOA." She laughed, and for the first time it sounded genuine. The day we officially opened the Pine Hollow Community Center, nearly 100 neighbors showed up. Children played on the newly cleared grounds. Adults chatted awkwardly at first, then with growing warmth. Melissa squeezed my hand as we watched. "Funny how things turn out," she said. "You inherited a storage building and ended up with something much bigger." "A lesson in unintended donations," I agreed. That evening, I checked my mail and found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,000 and a note. "For the tree. I'm sorry, Tom." The next day, I took the check to the nursery and bought 20 oak saplings. The following weekend, neighbors gathered with shovels and wheelbarrows. We planted trees in every spot where Diane had ordered hazardous removals over the years. As we worked, I noticed something remarkable. People who hadn't spoken in years were laughing together. Children ran between the planting sites carrying watering cans too big for them. Even Mrs. Schmidt smiled as she directed operations from a lawn chair, clipboard in hand. Standing back to admire our work, dirt under my fingernails and sweat on my face, I felt someone beside me. It was Jeff, looking thoughtful. "You know what amazes me?" he said. "How one person standing up can fix what seemed broken beyond repair." I shook my head. "Not one person. All of us together." I looked around at my transformed neighborhood. Not perfect, still healing, but alive with new possibility. And I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can donate isn't a building or money, but the courage to say enough when something is wrong. Would our community have found its voice if the HOA hadn't pushed too far with my storage facility? I'll never know for sure, but I'm grateful every day that they did.